Hi, I'm Steve O'Halloran of Asset Labs, and what is behind me here is the interface for our new software asset management, software license management, and data normalization service called Streamline. I'm about to take you through just the tip of the iceberg in a little 10-minute hold on to your hats demo of the software inventory and hardware inventory of a real company, though the name's been obscured. And if you can take a look up there, it says client devices 2,075 and servers 144. So we're looking at around 2,300 devices. And I'm going to show you how we normalize and categorize the data to find problems associated to software licensing, corporate productivity, corporate policy, security, budgets, the list goes on. The interesting thing here is that we did it without the use of an inventory agent. The reason is we don't have one. The reason for that is you already have one. In fact, you probably have inventory agents galore. Interestingly, though, the reason is also legal. I happen to be the patent inventor for an inventory tool that was sold to Microsoft in the late 2000s from my previous company called Asset Metrics. And the inventory tool that we created back then is now and has been the foundation, or at least the beginnings of what you now know as Microsoft Intune. So we don't have an inventory agent. And that's turned into our favor because Asset Labs and Streamline can actually take data from multiple inventory sources, whether it's SCCM, Lansweeper, Microsoft Map. You can export data from ServiceNow, Endpoint Manager. The list goes on. You can input any and all inventory data into your account, and Streamline will not only categorize and normalize, but it will determine the best representation of the device's inventory and apply it accordingly. So, what you're seeing on the left-hand side over here is a list of the publishers or vendors of what we have found. And for those of you that have been in the software asset management realm as long as I have, you might spot something a little interesting. Let me go over here. There it is. Where is it? Adobe. Account of 6,148. Now, what makes it unusual is that you're seeing the word Adobe and not Adobe Systems or Adobe Incorporated or Adobe Inc. or Adobe Comma Incorporated. That's because Streamline will normalize and then categorize all the data. And just to give a little secret away, if you take a look down here, we have some stats, which we're going to prove to you, that this data has about 9,300 software titles. We reduced it down to a little about 4,200 product lines. And I'll explain what a product line is. As well, when it came to the publishers, we started off with 874, but we boiled it down to 753. Because we identified publishers that had basically mutations, missing acquisitions, the list goes on. We do this live and we clean it up so that you only get one reference of a publisher. Whether it's eHelp acquired by Macromedia, acquired by Adobe, it'll all show up as Adobe. Now we'll show you the raw data too, but you need to normalize the data in order to do what we're about to show you. So first of all, there's just a list of vendors. But what we're going to do is that we're going to flip it around, because what we have also offered for our Streamline clients is to identify the fiscal footprint of all software found within your inventory, recognizing here that Microsoft has a fiscal footprint of over $2 million, Adobe $37,000, Rockwell $28,000. Now, this is not the licensable, the licensing value. This is what it would have cost you had you put it all out there, right? Let me reset that. It is the value of the software that we have found, and it is not yet what you owe. We'll get to that in a minute. But let's take a look here. Let's open up the tree. Right now, we're no longer working with grids like a spreadsheet. We have now organized the data into a single vendor with representative product families. Those of you that are that understand Microsoft and Adobe will recognize these product families. Let's take a look at the Office Suite family. Now we get to product lines. Here's the product line called Office Professional. Do you see any versions? Not yet. They're buried underneath. But whether Office Professional is 2010 Pro Plus, the old 2007 Enterprise, the XP 2002, they're all Office suites, right? They're all variations of the same core product called Office Professional. And if you ever dealt with volume licensing from Microsoft, you'll recognize that when you buy a volume license agreement in 2019, and it's a 3-year program, when a new version comes out, you also get that version. So it is version agnostic, and we follow that logic. Well, let's roll back here. Before we go too far, let's click on Microsoft. Now, whenever we select one of the branches on the left-hand side, something interesting happens here. Now, let me just expand this a little bit so we're going to have some fun. There we go. So let's take a look at Microsoft. Microsoft, the summary, we've got 663 product lines available in that tree. We're not going to show them all to you now. The important ones are probably the 33 licensable, of which we still have to license about 31 of them. And since we haven't applied all the licenses, we're doing the calculations, and you still owe about $644,000. That's because it's a demo. Well, in some cases, you're probably used to that number. But let's take a look now at, well, actually, let's take a look at the entitlement exposure. And you can now take a look. Now, this is true whether it's Microsoft, Adobe, Corel. You select the entitlement exposure, and you will get a very quick ledger of the licensable products. Notice that there are no components, device drivers. Now, the data exists. We'll show that, but only in the proper context. In licensing, it's noise. And also from productivity and policy perspective, it's also noise. And so we don't show it there. We'll show it to you later. So we can now take a look at all the different products. Well, down here, interesting, we've got some green numbers down here in Office Professional. So let's take a look at Office Professional. And let's take a look. First of all, we'll go to right up here. Where did Office Professional? There we go. Now, in Office Professional, we have 1,818 installs. And though we see another count right beside it, the effective count is 1,805. It's 13 less than the raw inventory. What do we mean by effective count? Well, what we mean is that we don't think you should be counting all 1,818 from a license perspective. We found 13 that we don't think you should count. Now, keep that in mind. First of all, let's take a look at the version, dispersion, and support information. So if the vendor, and this is beyond Microsoft, it's Corel, Adobe, Autodesk, if they publish mainstream or extended support, it will be found in your Streamline subscription. So you can take a look at what is no longer supported. Now, of course, here we're looking at a very old demo data set from 2017. It's 5 years old. Nothing supported anymore. Surprise, surprise. But if they were, they'd be green and yellow if they were upcoming or you got many years to go. We can also take a look at the devices that have that particular software installed. But let's take a look at the licensing information here. Now, remember I said we thought that you didn't have to count 13 of them and you should only count 1,805. Well, let's take a look at this down here. Well, first of all, on the left-hand side, we're only counting 1,805. We'll get to that in a minute. And your licenses are applied here from your MLS or otherwise. And what we're doing here is using what we're calling cascading downgrade logic to determine that based upon the numbers that we have found, the inventory versus the license data, is that you still have 17 entitlements available at the top shelf, at the top version of what you own. And there are 278 that are under the surface. In other words, these 278, and where are they? There they are, 2007 Pro Plus. What this means is that they're not being used. So they're potential for license reharvesting. Now, the question is, if someone just needed, Excel or Microsoft Word just for a couple months, would a product such as Office 2007 or 2013 or even 2016 be good enough? Do you have to buy the latest and greatest? Right? If not, you still have 278 that you can still deploy and you're licensed to do so. Now, the 13 that we said that you don't have to count, showed right here, we think that you have downgrade rights. Streamline automatically determines duplicate entries, downgrade rights, and also allows you to determine and to deploy MSDN non-production states, as well as no, this is third-party hardware or software or decommissioned. Let's take a look at that information. Again, let's take a look for those 13. There's a whole bunch of productions here. but let's do this. Let's just take a look at, the exempt downgrades. There they are, 13 of them. I can now click on any one device and let's take a look. First of all, before we get into any of this, let's take a look at the Streamline data. And I'm just going to type in Office Pro. Okay, so these are all the software titles on this specific device that start with Office Pro. And you can see we got a lot of proofing tools and Office Professional. Now, there are two, right? So yeah, we didn't make this stuff up. On this particular device, someone installed Office Professional. Actually, it was Office Enterprise 2007, version 12. They kept it, and then they installed Office Professional 2010 Pro Plus. Both of those different editions were basically were available on this device concurrently. But then Microsoft, this is a complex one, Microsoft said, you know what, let's give up on the Enterprise Edition. It didn't go very well, except in Japan, of all places. And they said, let's just roll Enterprise into Professional. So they basically killed that edition, and they said, okay, licensing rights are now covered underneath Professional. And here at Asset Labs, we take basically a shine to that sort of specific licensing scenarios so that you don't have to. Now, what this means is under a volume license agreement, you have downgrade coverage. And what this means is that you only have to take a look at Office 2010 Pro Plus for your volume license, and you can basically ignore 2007. Now, this is true for many, many, many vendors. Autodesk, Corel, the list goes on. Adobe as well will allow this capability, and it's automatically calculated in Streamline. So let's remove this right here. So we found that on 13 machines, and we removed them. Now, here is the Streamline data. Here is all of the software found on this particular device. And yeah, there's a lot of component updates. You can see the categories, the license types, and the software states. We'll talk about this in a minute. Now, the reality is that, let's take a look here. This is what you're used to. You're used to seeing Adobe Systems Incorporated, Google Inc., Google, Inc. So you can now see that we are applying live normalization, not only at the publisher level, but also at the product line. So you don't have to deal with this data. You can work with the Streamline data. Now, the bonus is all of this data, your original software titles, the renamed and streamlined titles, the license types, the categories, the MSRP, the end of support dates, all of this can not only be used for online reports within Streamline, but can also be exported for use within any other endpoint management, network management, or service management application that you're using. With your Streamline subscription, you can take the data home and use it for internal use while your subscription is available to you. Now, let's take a look at this. We have a device here. It's physical. Its birth date was February 20th, 2011. That's not the purchase date. There is actually no hardware purchase information found in this particular account. What's going on here? Well, here's the trick. We know that the CPU is an Intel Core i5. And Intel basically publishes that information, and they published it on February 20th, 2011. So what we're saying is that the birth date of the CPU of this device was February 2011. Now, is that when you received it? Probably not, but not too far off, right? It may be a month, 2 months, or 3 months. But as time goes on, and as you add up the number of devices that have birth dates, you get some interesting interfaces here. Let's take a look. I'm just going to close this down. Sorry about that. There we go. Let's take a look at the age analysis of the hardware that supports Microsoft Office. Now, this could be SQL Server. This could be Windows. This could be Autodesk. It doesn't matter. It's available for all software that when you select the age analysis, what you're going to see here is you can go back in time and recognize that, on the first quarter of 2005, we bought a lot of machines, nearly 300 of them. And then 5 years later, we bought another 280 or so, right? Now, what we're seeing here is massive purchase events in history which become today's death clusters. So this allows you to do two things. First of all, this allows you to basically determine whether or not hardware will be going obsolescent within 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and to what magnitude. In other words, this death cluster right here, well, it's actually 2020 something, right? Can't remember, it's COVID. And so that today would be basically a red light with respect to, we're going to have increased failure as time goes on with these machines. So you can anticipate that with Streamline. The other thing that it can do is that it can basically anticipate whether or not your new version of software, if you deploy it onto this range of hardware, basically, are you basically pushing what I'll call Corvette software onto Chevette hardware? In other words, can the hardware handle it? Right? As software gets more intensive, right, the hardware it may not keep up to it. Anybody with a home computer playing the newest version of games will go, yeah, that's right. I have to buy a computer every 8 years. It's not going to handle it. This one runs so much faster now that I got a new computer. It's true in the corporate environment as well. So that's true whether it's Microsoft Office or Nuance Communications or a product from Adobe or Rockwell as well. So let's take a look at now. You've seen some categories, some license types. We basically will apply the ISO 19770 license types to all of your product lines, and about 24 major categories and 500 different subcategories applied to your software as well. Now, this allows us to do a number of things. We can basically say, show me the peer-to-peer apps, right? Some built-in reports. Yeah, there they are. Show me the malware that exists and on what devices are they on, right? But as well, you can now take a look at the structure of your software with respect to functional categories. Let's take a look at just an example here. IT security. Here we go. There's about 2885 installs with security. And underneath the major category of security, we have a whole bunch of different subcategories. And here's endpoint protection. It's a big one. Let's take a look at it. So now as we open it up, we can now see that there are two major products available in this corporation. This is app and vendor rationalization. What is the rationalization for these 5 copies of Trusteer to be available compared to the 2200 of semantic endpoint protection? Can you rationalize that? The same thing also goes for the different versions within Symantec. Why are 25% at version 11? Shouldn't we all have the latest and greatest? It looked like that retired. Well, so did the other one as well. So app rationalization, version rationalization, and even vendor rationalization is available through this structure where you can then take a look at, well, let's take a look at the 5 devices, and there they are. And of course, you can export or print them out. The same thing for license type. We can flip now the data around, and we can take a look at what is homeware. What is homeware? A homeware is a license type in which a corporation says free for non-commercial use. And your software asset management endeavors are within a commercial corporation. So you shouldn't be seeing any of these things. So Adware, SE Personal, Qt FTP Home, Partition Master Home Edition, as long as that's on a personal computer, not owned by a corporation, that's okay. But as soon as you see them here in a corporate software asset management system, you have a scenario that you need to talk to a few people about. So as well, you can also take a look at what is the basically the magnitude of open source software found within my corporation's found within our software list here, and will you accept open source or not? Open source is fantastic, but we actually have some customers here at Asset Labs in which they don't know who to seek for support. And so open source is sometimes an issue. Whether it's an issue or you embrace it, you can now figure out whether or not, and you can take a look at the magnitude of what is free, what is trial. Yes, we even have one that's unassigned because we just don't know yet. It's dynamic. Keep that in mind. And so what you're seeing here is just the tip of the iceberg of Streamline. Let's go back to the publisher by cost footprint. It goes on and on and on. And on top of that, as you apply more information on a daily or weekly or biweekly perspective, we then retain the history of the populations of your versions of your software, so that you can take a look at whether or not things that are, well, let's see if we can find a new one here. No, we haven't found one here. So you can take a look at the last date here and basically see, has anything changed? Is anything new? Has anything disappeared? This goes on and on. So Streamline, available at $6.99 a month USD, available with no contract, no limit on the number of devices, no limit on the number of users, and no limit on frequency of use. There is so much more to see here, but we'll just leave it at that. If you're interested, click down below and request a trial. And we will certainly accommodate you with either a copy of this data, or if you so wish, your own data at no cost or obligation. Reach out. We'd love to help you. Cheers.